Of the League of Women Voters of Westbury, would like to welcome you to the League's 2018 Warrant 1 preview for the March 24th annual town meeting. With us tonight, we have Scott Hazelton, Chairman of the Board of Selectmen. We have Eric Heisman, who's our Assistant Town Manager, and we have Dan O'Donnell, who's our Finance Director. We're going to go through all 28 articles this evening. And because there are so many of them, we may go through some more quickly than others. We would like to save some of the time for the more complicated, articles that are out there. In addition to 28 articles and tonight, I'll also add that tonight is a educational and informational evening, not an opportunity for a debate or for voters to express their opinion on a particular side or a particular issue. You'll have plenty of time to do that at town meeting, and you'll do that all, I'm sure. So tonight is simply educational, informational. If you have questions, please jump in. It was an attempt to have a relaxed atmosphere. It's informal, as you can see, and get your questions answered on a more personal rather than in front of the thousands of voters who will be at town meeting, okay? And with that, we're going to go through the town meeting. For those of you who did not pick up one of the booklets, they're outside on the table, and we're going to go through numerically. Some we're going to go through more quickly than others. The less complicated ones or more finance-driven ones, we may go through more quickly. But if you have questions, I think it probably makes more sense. Do you want questions during the particular article or at the end?
During the article.
Okay, so if you do have questions, jump in at that particular time, okay? And with that, we'll begin. So Article number 1.
Excuse me, could I ask a question before we begin?
Sure, loud, so we can hear you.
I understood that there was a purchase of a large piece of land, 50 acres, that would be, I just thought it was said that would be on this town meeting, the Adams property. Not so? Is that later or?
Yeah, it's Article 13. We'll discuss that one.
Oh, it is?
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. So Article 1 is accept town reports. We have this article every year. Basically, we're voting to accept the reports of the boards and officers, from the boards and officers of the town. And this is on the consent agenda. It's one of 4 articles that the moderator will ask you at the beginning of the meeting to just approve.
Next.
Rolling right along here. All right, the second one is also one that we have from time to time. It's a bill of prior year. This was from the Westford Housing Authority. They did not invoice us for 2 months in FY17, so we do owe that money, so we want to appropriate so we can pay them. Article 3, all right. So this is for FY18 supplemental appropriations. As we move throughout the year, we often find that we're short in certain budgets that we need to supplement for various reasons. We'll go through the list quickly here. The first one is for Public Safety Communications Personnel Services. This is the dispatch office, a new combined dispatch that we have. Essentially, we budgeted as if they would open in July. However, they weren't fully complete with the project until November, so they had to staff 2 stations, so they're requesting a little more overtime to fill those open shifts throughout the rest of the fiscal year. Next up is a number that's on the move. It's for snow and ice. This is for our operations to remove all the snow from the town. I spoke with Chip Barrett about 2 weeks ago, and we discussed that, yeah, $350 looks pretty good for this year, no big deal. So I take full responsibility for everything that happened in the last 2 weeks. I think I jinxed us. So we may be talking with the town manager early next week to see if we need to increase this figure for town meeting. However, this is one account that we are allowed to deficit spend, so we could just carry that deficit to next year and then take care of that shortfall at the October special town meeting.
So compared to last year, how does that $350?
That $350 is $50,000 less than last year. However, since I spoke with the highway superintendent, we had 3 nor'easters, so it should be beyond 400.
Okay.
Okay, so budget 432, recycling expenses. If you've at all watched the news in the month of January, you've noticed that China has stopped accepting a lot of the recyclables from different countries. As of last year, China took over half of the world's recycling in. So it's a major impact, and worldwide, everyone's struggling to figure out where we're going to put recyclables. So our contract with our vendor has a variable blended rate, so there is some volatility to that, and this is why we're going to see an increase in this budget for this fiscal year, and we do expect, unless there's some change with the acceptance of recyclables to China, this may be more volatile in the future. Item number 433 is solid waste expenses. This, quite frankly, is we pay by the ton to get rid of solid waste. Right now, we're on good contract with Covanta in Haverhill. We pay $70 a ton to dispose of municipal solid waste. Quite frankly, I think we're just disposing of more tonnage this year, so that price is going up a little bit this year.
Can everybody hear Eric in the back? We're good? Okay.
All right, next we have the 945 other post-employment benefits, or OPEBs. This is one of my favorite topics. So the normal process is we tend to fund the majority of the appropriation to the OPEB stabilization fund through the budget. However, if we have to appropriate some free cash to meet that target number, we do so in this article. So we're appropriating about $860,000 through the budget for next year, and this 135 will plug that gap so we meet our goal. So OPEBs are health insurance and life insurance for retirees. And lastly, we have the and further motion here, appropriating $25,000 from the ambulance enterprise retained earnings towards ambulance personal services. The fire union did sell their contract last June. Typically what we do is we have a comp reserve account under human resources that we transfer money into those budgets once the contract is settled. However, this is an enterprise, so we can't use general fund money to fund the enterprise. So we just need to appropriate $25,000 so they can make it through the end of the year.
Before we move on, I'd like to acknowledge our town moderator just came in. Susan Spooler is in the back of the room. Thank you, Frank. Next.
Article 4, 2018 budget transfers. We'll be transferring or requesting the transfer of $5,300 from the Planning Board Personal Services to the permitting expenses. So if you've been up to the second floor permitting office, which is where our zoning, permitting, building, and conservation offices are, it's pretty tight quarters. There's not a lot of workspace. We've recently going to be filling an assistant building commissioner position, an assistant planner, which we filled, and right now we're in the process of interviewing for a town planner, which was had promoted our director of land use management, Jeff Morrison. So with the addition of these two additional personnel in that office, we have to reconfigure the space to be able to fit them in. So this is the cost for purchasing new office furniture, working with WB Mason.
No questions, huh?
Can I go back one? I have a question on Article 3. Sorry to do this.
Article 3?
Yeah. I don't know, how much, what percentage over are these numbers? Like, is this 100% more than we budgeted, or is it like 5% or 1%?
For each office, the public safety dispatch budget is about $900,000, so we're asking $20,000 on top. Snow and ice, we earmark $400,000 each year as our minimum, and then we allocate another. We actually earmark $400,000 to fund the overage, so this is well within what we expected for the model. Recycling is around $700,000-800,000.
Correct.
Solid waste is about 1.3 million ish.
Yes.
The 945 budget is just a supplement. I mean, we're just trying to meet our goal, so it's 135. We're funding out of free cash at 995,000, and then ambulance is around $1 million. So minor amounts compared to the budgets.
Okay, Article 5?
Article 5 is to appropriate to the Health Insurance Stabilization Fund the amount of $100,000. So going into this current fiscal year, the town had received a renewal from Fallon Health Insurance in the amount of 13%, which was very significant. Through plan design changes, we were able to get that down to a 2.74% increase. Working with the town's Insurance Advisory Committee, did I get that correct?
Yes, you did.
I always get the acronym wrong. The employees have stressed a lot of complaints with Fallon Health, and there's a lot of desire to go back to Blue Cross Blue Shield. So, given the current trends for health insurance in Massachusetts of 9% for health insurance and 20% for prescriptions, we feel that it's prudent to put this money aside for future health insurance costs for employees.
That's why we're not actually spending this money, we're just reserving it in a separate account right now.
I have a question. Then you're putting it in a separate account, and what happens if you don't use it?
It's still our money, it's still sitting there, so
Does
it's,
it go back into the general fund, or?
it needs an appropriation to go back to the general fund, so it's what's called a stabilization account. So it takes a majority vote to put money into a stabilization fund and 2/3 to take it back out. But the money's still there.
So next year, might we be voting, I mean, I know it's wishful thinking, but to move it back?
Hopefully not, but it's a possibility,
Okay.
yes.
Thank you.
It'll have to be through a town meeting vote.
Okay, Article 6, Special Education Reserve Fund.
All right, this was a request from the schools. They're looking to establish another reserve fund for special education services. So essentially, this fund could pay for special education, out-of-district tuition, or special education transportation. The way it would work is that if the schools had some leftover money at the end of the year, they could ask the school committee to transfer those funds into this account rather than close it out to free cash. That way, in the following year, if they have a student come in that they weren't expecting, they could access these funds to help pay for those unforeseen costs. Now, to use the money, they need a vote from the school committee and the Board of Selectmen, so there is some town oversight over this as well.
If I just could add, so 5 years ago, this was a very real problem. We had a student move into the district late in the budget cycle. I think it was about a 300,000 plus hit to our school budget just for that one student because of his various medical needs and the outplacement he had to have. So we had a massive scramble at the end of the budget year to find that kind of money to plug the gap. And the idea is if this is in place, we can then say, it's here for the rainy day, it's pouring outdoors, spend it as planned.
Alicia Mallon is here from School Committee. Alicia, anything to add on this at all? Or any comments, or?
My only comment would be is I think this makes great fiscal responsibility because as you know, with our budget this year, we've cut back on and we cut back by 1.3 million, what we were originally requesting. And part of what we did to do that was to use the receipts from the circuit breaker for this year instead of next year. And that can create a volatile situation when it comes to special education funding. So I think this is a great way to cover ourselves in the future and make sure that we don't get into a pinch like that.
Good, thank you.
Question on this. So that means that money's not going to be going to free cash into the capital planning. Is that a concern?
We talk at the end of every year, so if we don't think we can meet our free cash target number, we'll let the schools know, and they work well with us, so.
And what does that mean? Then you expect them to find other funds then to go into free cash?
No. So basically, over the last 4 years or 5 years, I think they're averaging about $350,000 in closeouts. So if they take 100,000 of that and put it in this fund, then we'll have a lesser number. But we do communicate well. If we do projections for free cash, so I'm looking at all the revenue, all the potential closeouts, and we come up with a number that we're going to submit to the Department of Revenue. If that number is looking too low to fund what we think we need in the following fiscal year, we could let them know and be like, hey, maybe it's not a great year to put money into this account.
Fund.
Right.
Okay.
So it's, as we have money, not a requirement to put money into this fund?
It's not a requirement, nope.
But a certain percentage still has to go into free cash. I know you make that assessment, but I know, and we've talked about this a little bit before, but with the school department, they work towards that number, that whatever number that they give back. It's been between $200,000 and $300,000, I think, for the past 5 years. So what number are they working towards?
We haven't had that discussion yet. They have absorbed some additional costs this year within their operating budget, so I'm not expecting that number to be high. It'll be on the lower end of what they did in the past 5 years, but we still need to talk about that, and we still have 4 months left of bills to go, so.
Thank you.
Okay, perchlorate.
Article number 7, perchlorate expenses. This article is related to our ongoing mitigation efforts. If you've lived here long enough, you've probably heard the term perchlorate. This was related to the construction of our highway garage in 2003 and 2004. We had blasting operations that released a chemical known as perchlorate into the groundwater. We've been working to mitigate this from the groundwater since 2004 with the Mass DEP through an administrative consent order. Has ongoing annual expenses. We work with a licensed site professional. We're under contract with Woodard and Curran. We do groundwater testing at various sites and at several homes that were impacted by this. We use on-site services for that, and there's an administrative fee from Mass DEP. So these costs have gradually been going down each fiscal year, and we hope that they continue to do so. One of the major operational savings is the nutting treatment plant, which was constructed to mitigate the perchlorate in the groundwater, was permanently closed through the permission of the Mass DEP. I believe it was in August of 2017. So that's a major operational savings right there alone.
Questions?
Question, are these funds over and above what's already being spent on this issue?
So this is to supplement the funds we already have appropriated. So you could see the projected carryover from 18 of $63. So this is anticipated to get us through FY19.
Okay.
What's the total sum spent to date on this issue?
I have this number, but Jody would correct me if I said it. So I know it's well in excess of $2 million. The nutting treatment plant alone was roughly $2 million plus the Stupinski well. I don't have that exact number, so I don't want to guess.
On Article 8, we have 12 capital requests, so I don't think we need to go into each one, but maybe we can pull out a couple of them. So, for example, public building, large dollar ones, $320,000, and for the Boston Road reconstruction for $260,000. Eric, do you want to talk to both of those?
Oh, absolutely. So the design appropriation of $320,000 for the center building. So if you've driven down Boston Road lately, you've seen that we're building a fire station. As part of that project, we're also going to be demolishing the center fire station that sits currently next to Town Hall. We've done a lot of studies over the last few years and determined that we need an additional building to be able to provide better services for our residents. For those of you who have gone to a Board of Selectmen meeting, you may have seen that many residents are out in the hallway because there's not adequate seating. Our current Board of Selectmen meeting room seats 49 people. We are looking to construct a 100-person meeting room that would be the Board of Selectmen's main meeting room moving forward. Additionally, our technology department has been out in one of our fire stations for the last several years, and we'd like to bring them in with the rest of the staff and get them into an adequate location. Also, we'll talk about later on the warrant here is we are looking to bring on board a new facilities director position to work for both the town and the schools, so we can have some long-range planning for our facilities and infrastructure. As of right now, the town and school facilities manage their own separately. So the facilities director will need an office, and it's proposed to go inside of this new center building along with a new facilities office manager. And lastly, our veterans agent, Terry Stater, is currently in this building, and it's been a challenge because a lot of veterans with mobility issues have issues making it all the way down the driveway here because that's closed off. And when it's the preschool or that's not preschool. Is it preschool?
It's preschool.
Yeah, when preschool's in session and the gate's up, the veterans will have to walk the length of the main parking lot down to the center doors and then down the whole length of the hallway here just to get to the office to get services from Terry. And it's really been a challenge. So we're hoping to put him into the building and the plans to make him the most accessible office right off the parking lot. So, and we will be having some small storage, but so that is that project.
And by the way, so we had a public meeting on this Monday night, March 12th, which WCAT kindly taped. So if you want to see the architect's discussion, the plans, public comment, look for the March 12th meeting online. You can can see all of the detail. Was it Western News? Thank you. WesternCat.org. Thank you.
Any questions on the 320?
I just want, is there, so unfortunately I missed the meeting on Monday, but is there an opportunity, once we allocate this money, for public input into the design, or has that already taken place?
Oh, no,
Go ahead.
I mean, this is, what we have now is essentially a conceptual drawing of how it could look. This takes us to the next step, which is to actually have a real plan to comment upon. So this is just the start of the process. You'll have plenty of chances to.
Thanks.
260.
I think
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, sorry, just a question, I just don't understand this, first time I've been in one of these meetings. Why would some of these be in an appropriation versus in the budget? As a line item in the, one of the other departments within the budget? Are these separate? These are all separate and above the budget? Why are some items, what makes some items like the percolate an appropriation and others
So we
part
actually,
of the budget?
we have a definition for capital. So it has to be over $10,000 for the item. Life of 5 years, and what's the last one? I have it written right here. So it's not regularly non-recurring expenses, so it's not in the operating budget. Because otherwise you see the operating budget going up and down like crazy. So we do set aside a minimum of $1.5 million per year in free cash, which is the Board of Selectmen's budget policy. And using that money, we can fund these items outside the operating budget.
Is there anything above and beyond? So back to Article 7 for a second, isn't that a recurring expense that's been happening every year since 2004? Would that not be part of the budget instead of a separate appropriation? Or is it because of the dollar amount being over and above?
I mean, it is technically ongoing. We're trying to minimize this expense moving forward, but to try to fit that within the budget would, take away from something else as well. So we have been historically funded that through free cash.
And every year we go to the state and try to get that removed. And every year it gets a little bit lower, but it never goes quite away. So it's hard to budget precisely for it.
I have a follow-up, Dan. That's got me thinking. The design for a public building doesn't sound like something I would normally think of as capital. It's not a tangible thing that you can depreciate and so forth. How does that fit in the definition? Because it sounds like we're buying a stack of paper, basically.
We consider that stack of paper capital, so it has to be funded this way, or to fit $320,000 in the operating budget would be very difficult. I mean, that would take some very difficult choices there. So,
Well, it's the same principle as Beaverbrook Road culvert replacement, which has a design document. So typically, design documents are considered pre-construction and therefore capital.
Interesting.
Is that how we funded the fire department and Road and Bush and through capital?
yes, so for like the fire department, we appropriated $1 million from free cash, and then we had debt exclusion for the balance. Road and Bush, we use community preservation funds, a bond through them, and then also a non-excluded bond, which is repaid through the budget, the operating budget, without raising taxes.
Along those lines, why, Paul said it's a stack of paper, why is a feasibility study so much money?
Why is the feasibility study? That's a...
Honestly, public construction, it tends to be a lot more costly than if you were to do projects at your own home, for instance. Prevailing wages are impacted by this. The studies, especially when you're looking at large municipal projects, it can be upwards of hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's just the facts of what it is. We do put these out to bid, competitive bids, so to allow multiple vendors to give us pricing for it. So we do all we can to keep the prices low as possible.
Anything else? The next large Boston Road reconstruction project design.
Okay, so back to Boston Road. So this is for the design. So this would be for the complete reconstruction of it. Complete side-to-side asphalt, new drainage, water lines. So as part of that, our town engineer has been working to get this on the tip, Transportation Improvement Project through NIMCOG, who's the Northern Middlesex Council of Governments.
Correct.
Got those all correct.
Yep.
So as part of the TIP project process, you have to design the project to their standards. So our town engineer has been working with NIMCOG to have this project designed. They've brought it before the selectmen at least once, and we've had a public hearing, I believe,
Yes.
to show conceptual drawings on different options, whether it be 2 bike lanes or the width of the road. So those meetings have already taken place. So in order for us to receive state funding for this project, we have to design it to the TIP standards. Am I missing anything, Dan?
Sounds pretty good.
Any other items?
I have a question on the water main, $20,000. How come that isn't being paid for by the water enterprise fund? Since it's for a water main design project.
Where are you?
On engineering.
Capital appropriations, right underneath the Boston Road one, the Plain Road, Oak Hill Road, Moore Road, water main design.
Oh, these are so we like to coordinate our projects, so when the water enterprise is trying to install a new water main, we'll redo the road and everything like that, so, which, we make improvements to the infrastructure above, which isn't part of the water.
Oh,
So it's a combination of both water enterprise and
Right. We-
general funds.
We really try to coordinate the projects, because the last thing you want to do is pave a road and then find out 2 years later the water department wants to tear it up and replace a water main. So we have these meetings every year to try to coordinate our projects out 5 years, so those issues don't happen.
In many cases, also drainage issues you could fix at the same time, so if you're gonna dig it up, put in the cement stuff along with the steel stuff.
You'll also have plenty of opportunity to dig deeper into the rest of these, requests at annual town meeting. So we'll move along. Okay.
Looks like you are with the roads.
On the roads, okay. In the second motion, you'll see that we want to borrow $845,000 to catch up on our road repairs. 2 years ago, the Highway Department and Engineering Department bought a pavement management system to track the condition of all the roads, and they go out every couple of years and take a survey. That allows the highway superintendent to give us a list of every road in town that needs repairs and how bad, if it just needs crack sealing or needs total replacement. So we're able to use that list, and we thought this was a good time to go ahead and catch up on these roads. We'll have this $845,000 plus the Chapter 90 money, which is in a future article here, of about $887,000 to repair roads for next year. So essentially what happened is Jody Ross, the town manager, went around with Chip Barrett, the highway superintendent, and he took her on some of the roads, and her coffee was spilling everywhere because the roads were so bad. So I guess it failed the test and it needed immediate attention.
Would this include free or mitigation asphalt from the asphalt plants?
Not at this time. However, that list of roadways that needs repairing is extensive. So at that time that we can access those funds, I'm sure they'll be used for
So we
those
don't know when we
projects.
can access those funds?
We can't get, the funds come after the plant's complete and not operational, and the plan, as far as I know, is begin construction in the spring. That may be happening, so we won't be seeing any money this fiscal year, certainly.
Will a yes vote impact my tax bill, and do you have a rough estimate of what that might be?
The tax bill? Well, this is to be borrowed within the levy limit, so
Oh, okay.
so it's not an exclusion. So technically, it's not raising taxes to pay for it,
Great, thank you.
above and beyond Prop 2.5.
The third motion.
Okay, so this is an exciting project. This is the street light retrofit project. This is to consider replacing all of our high-pressure sodium street lights with LED lights. If you've read on the state websites, they're really pushing for communities to do this. There's been many across the state that have already addressed this. So this project is unique because town of Westford currently owns roughly 200 streetlights, and the remainder 975 are owned by National Grid. So in order for us to retrofit those and actually see those savings, we need to purchase the 975 streetlights from National Grid. We've negotiated with them, and we're currently at roughly $36,000. We just received the final purchase documents from them this week. We are working with the Metropolitan Area Planning Council There's a grant that's being managed by the Department of Energy Resources to provide 30% of the funding for the replacement of streetlights to go to LED fixtures. In addition, 15% towards the installation of Wi-Fi controls. So this would enable our highway department to have a computer software program so they can see when there's outages right from the office. They don't have to wait for somebody to pick up the phone and say, my streetlight's out. We would be assuming the streetlight maintenance, and we would have to procure a contract for that service instead of National Grid providing it, which is where you achieve most of your savings, because the tariff rates are set by the Department of Public Utilities, and when National Grid provides that maintenance, you pay a considerably high tariff rate, versus when you go to LED and the town owns them, they're transferred to what's called an S5 tariff rate, which is you save considerably on both maintenance and electricity. So, in addition to this project, we recently, applied for a Green Communities grant for $250,000. So we won't find out for that until roughly June or July of this year. But if we do end up getting the Green Communities and the 30% MAPC grant, the 15% for the controls, bear with me, it's a complicated project, that would essentially bring the total cost of this project down to $81,000, which would be great. We're hoping that that's the case. We've been pretty successful in the past with the Green Communities applications. We've received roughly $867,000 in the last 4 to 5 years from the program, so we're feeling pretty optimistic.
Eric, what's the estimated or thought on savings operationally as we move forward?
So we worked with the MAPC to estimate our savings, and I think their figures were a little conservative, a little too conservative for me anyways. They felt as though we were going to save roughly $85,000 a year in electricity. I don't want to say that much. I would say closer to 70. Our current budget is roughly $115,000 or $112,000 for streetlights, so it's a major savings either way.
But that's offset by the maintenance costs that you're going to have to do, right?
Well, I will say, the LED streetlights come with a 10-year manufacturer warranty. If anything goes wrong, it's replaced, free from the manufacturer. The towns are procuring contracts where they have somebody on standby, and towns like Ashland, where I used to work, we did an LED project while I was there, and interestingly, the police department managed the lights there. Good joke, but we would just create a list of outages, and once we had 5 or 10, we would call in the vendor to replace those, because it was better with more economies of scale to have them in rather than do one at a time. So we do anticipate a major savings.
Thank you. Questions? Fourth motion. $500,000 for Groton Road and Dunstable Road water main.
Well, this is to replace the water main on Groton Road and Dunstable, so pretty self-explanatory.
Okay.
Thanks.
Fifth motion.
Just to replace it? It's extension.
Yeah, they're gonna make water system improvements in the area while they're putting the new light in. I believe the new traffic light is the plan.
That's correct.
Fifth motion.
Fifth motion.
Free cash.
So this is transferring $40,000 from free cash to the capital stabilization fund. Back in July, we had a special town meeting, and one of the motions on that special town meeting was to fund the joint dispatch project. The person who built Cornerstone Square, Robert Walker, he promised the town $200,000 for some type of municipal project. It bounced around uses, and we finally settled on the dispatch. However, in the contract, it said that he could pay us back over a 5-year period. So since we took that money out of capital stabilization, we plan on putting that $40,000 we receive from him each year back into it.
Thank you. Okay, Article 9. Capital expenditure, I'd like to introduce Bill Taffel, citizen. Okay, okay. Bill is a citizen's petition person for Article 9 for the plan for the traffic signal at the intersection of Boston Road and Main Street.
And so what I'm going to do is run through what's the presentation that I have for the town meeting that gives all the information about what this article is and why and so on. And it's, in theory, a 7-minute presentation for the town
And if you
meeting.
could speak up a little, that would be great.
Oh,
I
can
was
you hear
just
me?
told.
I can speak up louder. What is Article 9? Article 9 adds to the Boston Road Reconstruction Project, which you just heard about, an ornamental traffic light at the intersection of Boston Road and Main Street in the town center and appropriates $55,000 of capital to fund the design. And as a result of that, we get the traffic light at that intersection, which is needed to improve safety and reduce congestion, at a cost to the town of only the $55,000 for design, plus any additional cost to make it ornamental. But the state pays the cost of the light itself, which will be about $1 million. The intersection itself is shown here on this map. If you imagine coming up Boston Road to the green, going left at the green, and coming to the stop sign right there on Main Street, that's the intersection that we're talking about. The goals are simple: to improve safety of pedestrians and motorists, to reduce congestion during the peak periods, shorten commute times, preserve the common's historical and visual character, and save the $1 million in the process. Why is this not going? Can you move to the next slide? Okay, so I will address these 3 questions, but I'll start with the last one first. Because the Boston Road Reconstruction Project is, as you heard, a state-funded TIP project, the funding arrangement is such that the town pays only the design cost and the state covers the construction cost. And that arrangement will apply to this light only if it's attached to this project now. And as you heard, the Boston Road Reconstruction Project is in process, and it's extremely difficult, if not impossible, to add to the scope of work of a project like that later. The availability of the state funds itself is not the reason for the traffic light, but the need for the traffic light is a good reason to take advantage of the availability of state funds to cover the cost. And if we miss this opportunity and we have to put in a light later, it'll be at full cost to the town. So if you ever think we'll need a light ever at that intersection, which I think is a relative certainty, now would be a good time to do it. See if this, hey, it worked. Oh, you already moved. There are several problems in the center that the signal would help to solve. First, pedestrians crossing the street have to dodge traffic, even in the crosswalks. Motorists risk and fear collision, particularly when they go through that Boston Main Street intersection. And then there's congestion. During peak hours, the traffic is backed up in the morning to the Abbott School and in the evening all the way to 495, as anybody who drives through there at those times of day will know in experience. Now this graph shows the total cars coming into the center from the 2 directions of Main Street, which are the top 2 sections, and from Boston Road on a typical weekday. Boston Road is the green on the bottom, and they add. So during the morning rush hour, traffic peaks at about 1,700 cars an hour. And in the evening, it peaks at about 2,000 cars per hour. And even more surprising is that once the volume goes over 1,000 cars per hour in the morning, it doesn't get back under 1,000 cars per hour until after the evening rush hour. So we actually have a traffic problem there, not only during the peak periods, but all day long. And so you will hear people say there is no traffic problem, but remember this picture. This slide is a record of the accidents in the center since 2009, put together by the Westford Police Department. The total number of accidents over that period in the lower right-hand corner there is 92, of which half occurred at the intersection of Boston and Main Street. And fortunately, none of those accidents involve fatalities or serious injuries, although in 2 cases there were pedestrians who were struck by cars. But we know that the intersection would be safer with a light. we sort of have a history, as do a lot of towns, of waiting until there's a serious accident until we actually put a light in. I would question whether we really want to do that in this case. Now, these next two slides show the analysis that the traffic engineers from the Northern Middlesex Council of Governments, also known as NIMCOG, reported on in 2014. Level of service is a measure of the efficiency of an intersection, which combines the travel time, delay, freedom to maneuver, traffic interruptions, and other factors. It's measured and ranked in categories from A to F, with E and F being regarded as failures, which are red in this picture. C and D are sort of in the middle, and A and B, which are acceptable, are green. So these are the results of their analysis. Most of the intersections in this town center are in that failure category during both the morning and the peak and the evening peak period, which are what those two right-hand columns represent. Now, this is the effect of putting a traffic light at Boston and Main intersection. You see that for that intersection, everything goes from being red at the outset to being really quite acceptable. So the purpose of the light is not to stop the traffic, it's to facilitate its movement through in a more orderly way. Now, this slide you can read for yourself, but the quote is taken directly from the NIMCOG report, and it attributes most of the problems in the center to the Boston-Main intersection. And so the NIMCOG report, which also looked at a three-way stop at that intersection, as well as turning the whole center into a roundabout, recommended the traffic signal at the intersection. The benefits are pretty clear. It improves safety, reduces congestion, reduces polluting emissions from idling cars, and also reduces the need for gap decisions. That is, can I make it through this gap without getting hit? Which, again, anyone who has turned left from Boston Road onto Main Street will be familiar with. As a result, people will be able to notice and enjoy the common rather than just worry about getting through it without mishap. So why ornamental? Well, preserving the tranquil historical look of the common is a top priority. But we cannot ignore that this is 2018, and we must do something to address the traffic and safety issues. But we can do so in a way that's consistent with the spirit of the common by using a light with ornamental features. And this picture here is a picture of the Forge Village light, which is such an ornamental light, and you'll see that the column is a fluted column, is made to look sort of like an old-fashioned lamppost, and the arm holding the lights over the street is an arc rather than just your plain cylinder. And there's a lot of variety that you can have depending on how much money you want to spend. So the center already has, in 2018 here, has 21st century necessities like wide paved streets, utility poles, wires, and street lights, as well as over 20,000 cars a day. And if these can coexist with history in the common, why not a traffic light? So this is the common today. You see the utility pole with the massive wires, and we live with this, and probably nobody even notices this when they go through there. So again, what's so different about a traffic light? And then this last slide just summarizes that Article 9 lets us solve the safety and congestion issues in the center while preserving its historical character. And it also saves the town $1 million in the process. So that's why I submitted this petition. So if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to take them. And yeah, sure.
The 55,000 is for the engineering services?
That's for the design. And actually, that's a design study in which they redo all the traffic volume studies. They look at alternatives for how to solve the problems, and they come up with a proposed design.
And so what would the total cost?
The total cost of doing the light is that $1 million, which the state would cover. Plus, if you want to put those ornamental features on, the town pays that.
Right.
Which is estimated about $60,000 for the.
So where would the 60,000 come from?
The 60,000 would be allocated by the town at some later point when it decided how much it wanted to spend on that.
Okay, so it's not included in
No, it wouldn't be in the 55,000 doesn't pay for the ornamental features. It pays for the design, and the state won't pay for ornamental lights.
Right.
So the town would have to decide how much ornamental features it wants to pay for and pony up the money. And just to put it in perspective, I think it's the Dunstable Road light that's being looked at now, the ornamental aspect of those are estimated at the $60,000, which is where they come up with the same number. Yes.
Do you have other examples of ornamental lights, other than the motorists and
I don't have any here, but there are,
everything that without that long arm?
you know, there are a lot of different ways. There are really only two ways to put a light out in the middle of the street. One is on an arm, and the other is on a wire hanging over the street. If you have a wire hanging over the street, then you have to have a pole on both sides holding it up. So there are kind of trade-offs, you know, depending on the exact situation. And again, part of the purpose of the study would be to look at what alternatives you have. And
you don't have budget yet for the ornamental lights.
no, that would not be part of the.
And so who knows whether eventually how much it's going to cost.
Well, again, the estimate that's based on the lights that are going in at Dunstable Road is $60,000. And the engineers, the town engineer, Paul Seritz, thinks it would be a comparable amount. But, of course, if you want to spend $1 million on an ornamental feature, you know, then it's going to cost you $1 million.
There are only three types of ornamental lights. The lights hanging on the wire, or the lights with the pole, with the ornamental pole, and with the long arm.
Well, all I'm saying is that there are really only those two ways to get a light out into the middle of the street, ornamental or not. You know, you have to have it either hanging from a wire or you have to have it on a post from the side. You know, so the question is, how can you make those ornamental?
We've got a tight schedule, so jump in if you
So-
have questions, quick.
Why the town didn't put in a light after this NIMCOG report came out in 2014, and maybe this is a question for Scott White, Board of Selectmen, not approving it now?
So we take a look at intersections in town in terms of the risk, and this is not a particularly high-risk intersection. I mean, the accident rate is, what, 92 in 10 years or 9 years. Only half of them actually at this intersection, so 4.5 per year. None of them serious, compared to other spots in town where we're putting lights in at Tadmuck now, at Oak Hill Road next year, at Dunstable Road is on the warrant for the future. So just from the selectman standpoint, this was not a high priority intersection. I think our perspective is, when you put in stoplights, we look at these things for years. Oak Hill was 2 or 3 years in the planning. It's not built yet. And in fact, the vote of the selectmen at our last meeting was, this is just too fast, that we would normally spend 2 or 3 years looking at a stoplight, not 2 or 3 months. And
But what actually happened was that NIMCOG report came out in March of 2014. A committee was formed by the selectmen, the Town Center Parking and Traffic Committee, and that committee, when it was given its charter, was told to exclude the traffic light and the rotary from consideration. So the only option they had was a three-way stop, which was not recommended by the study. They recommended the three-way stop. That went out to another engineering consultant, who also said it was not a good idea. So that's what happened. That's where we are now.
if you look back to the NEMCOG report, we had an open meeting at the library, November of 14, I think. And it was, we filled the library's main meeting room, and there was no interest in a stoplight. So the selectmen's direction to the Town Center Traffic Committee was based upon the fact that at the public hearing, there was no interest in the part of the town to put a stoplight there. So it kind of gravitates forward from that.
But the hearing, I would add, was before the NIMCOG report was completed. So NIMCOG was aware of the hearing, participated in the hearing, and knew the result when they still recommended the same thing. It's a difference of opinion, I think, between NIMCOG and the...
No, NEMCOG had the report, that was a presentation of their report, so it was completed. If the NEMCOG report was presented to the town at that November meeting. So the town was aware of their findings, and those present did not support it at the time.
One more question.
Do any of the traffic studies project what's likely to happen in the future after we put this traffic light in? My concern being that with GPS and all this other stuff, the route through Westford Center turns from red to green and the traffic doubles and so forth, and we've gotten nowhere.
Well, first of all, the NIMCOG study, in doing this thing, looked at a projected growth and just a normal growth in traffic of, I think, 1% a year or something like that. And, you know, and to evaluate what would happen to the intersection with the putting in the light or with putting in the rotary or the stop sign. So they factored in some form of growth. I've discussed that exact topic with the town engineer, this question of how do you know you're not going to just get a lot more traffic because people can get through there without these long delays. And I think the view is that, first of all, people don't tend to go through Westford if they can get around it by Route 3 or to 495. People have this impression that you have a lot of people cutting through. They're not going to cut through to go through a slower route. And so the existing routes are pretty viable for people who can go by them. The route through the center of town is really primarily for people who have to go through the center. Most people who go through the center of town don't go there because they like sitting in traffic jam. So the thought that you would bring more traffic in just doesn't really seem to make sense. What happens today is that people using things like Waze see the center is jammed up and they go around through all the other streets in Westford. You know, so, which is not what you want either, because those streets aren't at all meant for traffic. Some of them being residential neighborhoods.
So I think we're going to move on.
Yeah, we'll move on.
No, well, I'm just going to say Bill is around, so for those of you who have immediate questions and want to stick around afterwards to ask your individual questions, and obviously at town meeting, you'll have an opportunity to drill more down into this. But stick around if you have questions for Bill later, and you can get a one-off, answer. Okay, Article 10.
Article 10, to approve capital appropriations for the MSBA Abbott roof replacement project. So the school department and school committee submitted a statement of interest to the Mass School Building Authority last year, February 2017, and were accepted into the program in May. We at the special town meeting in July of 2017, the town appropriated $50,000 for partial funding of the design phase for the project. The school committee worked with the selected owner's project manager and architect for the project and has submitted the the feasibility study and schematic design. I want to make sure I got that term right. And the MSBA has approved the project with a budget of roughly $3 million. One of the best parts of the MSBA Accelerated Repair Program is they reimburse the town roughly. We've been approved for a 44.48% reimbursement rate for eligible costs, so that will keep the cost of the project down. We should have the construction cost numbers by town meeting because the bids were due today, so hopefully Bill Olson will have those available for us next week.
So Eric, where's this $3 million? If we don't have the estimates yet, where is this $3 million coming from then?
So the MSBA calculates that budget, so the bids could come back significantly less, or they could come back more. But we're going to be optimistic till we see them.
And historically, what have we?
I can't speak for Westford, but I've done 2 MSBA projects in another municipality, and they tend to come in less than the MSBA project budget, so we can only wait to see.
Okay.
So would you update the warrant based on today? So the dollar amount would be updated
I think they already approved, the MSBA already approved these numbers, so if the bid comes in lower, which would be great, there'd be a contingency there. So we're borrowing this project, so we're not gonna borrow the full $3 million if it only costs $2.5 million. So we'll basically just permanently bond at 2.5, if that's the number, and then come back to town meeting and have you rescind the additional debt. So it's giving us basically a higher budget, and based on the capital discussions, we're expecting us to come in around $2 million as a net cost. So hopefully we're right around there.
Thank you. Article 11?
Actually, 11 and 12 are related. We have to approve 11 to do 12. So this will be the first time that Westford has done a water betterment. A betterment is a public project that is paid for directly by the beneficiary. So this is really no cost to the town. The project here is for Vinebrook Estates on the south side. Their water system is failing right now, and they want to connect to the town water. So this money here will authorize the town to go in and put the water mains in and connect the houses to the town's water system. And in future years, we'll put an assessment on their tax bill, a special assessment, and we'll recoup that money over the next 20 years to pay for that bond that we're taking out with interest.
Any questions?
It says, can I ask a question? It says in Article 11, if the owner is a low-income elderly homeowner, an agreement, a deferral of the payment, what does that mean? Who will it be deferred to or when?
So basically, it's deferred until they sell their home, at which point the town will collect the money.
And is there any idea per house how much it will be? Because I know that development isn't huge.
I think there's like 78 homes in there, somewhere around there. So
So do you know what the per home assessment would be roughly?
I don't at this point, but if it's 1.82 million over 20 years as a bond payment, you know, each house will be around $20-some-odd thousand that they have to pay back over 20 years. So,
But you might ask that at time.
sure. Steve Cronin probably has that figure, so I'll tip him off.
Thanks.
I have a question. Can you say why it is currently failing? Is it because of pollution or lack of water?
I think the system that was put in there by a developer just wasn't meant to last more than 30 years, so it's failing right now. So rather than, so the homeowners came together, and rather than each digging their own well or whatnot, then they asked the town to step in and help them with this project. Vinebrook, it's yeah, off Powers Road. Ideal concrete right down there.
There's conservation land abutting it at the end. It's across from, there's a gravel place there and a concrete.
And unfortunately, the infrastructure that was put into the ground when these homes were built isn't sufficient to withstand the pressure of our system. So therefore, the water department has to completely replace the infrastructure up the street into each house.
Oh my gosh. I'm sorry. I'm saying that because I live in Parker Village, but not in a development. You know, it's such a-
Do you want this? Yeah.
Is this the furthest south that town water's ever come to? Because, I mean, I generally think of like south of 120 is no town water, so is this the first time that town water's come that far south, or, like, that seems like a long distance to go.
I don't know exactly where that main
No,
is.
water was brought down Powers Road about 4 or 5 years ago. There were some commercial operations in the non-dome property down there that contaminated the groundwater. And so non-dome brought down the main off of 110 all the way down to Equestrian Way. So the main goes right across the front of Vinebrook Road.
Okay, Article 13, we've got CPC recommendations. We've got 12 items. We're not going to go through each one, but let's hit some of the highlights. Most expensive seems to be Saltbox Farm. Andrea, do you want to talk about that?
So for people who don't know, Saltbox Farm is about a 65-acre piece of property that's on Hildreth Street. If you're going down Hildreth Street off the center, it's right off the center, and it's on the left-hand side of the road. And the Westford Land Preservation Foundation has been working with the owner of the property now for a few years in working with her and trying to preserve some of that property. So we have reached an agreement with her in which we will be preserving we will be putting a conservation restriction on 45 acres of that land, and then the homeowner will retain the remaining portion of the land where the farmhouse is, which is a historic building. It's one of two buildings that are from the 17th century here in Westford, and retaining about 6 acres of land so that her children can, if they would like sometime in the future, to build a home. The land abuts conservation land that the town already owns and also that the Conservation Trust owns. If you drive down Hildreth Street, it's an absolutely beautiful view. It's the field that you see on the left. So the project is akin to the project of O'Brien Farm, if some of you remember that from several years ago, where the town purchased this conservation restriction on O'Brien Farm. So the Westford Land Preservation has gone to the CPC. The CPC has recommended the funding. The foundation is committed to raising privately about $200,000 to help the cost of this project. Okay?
Thank you.
You're
Any
welcome.
questions?
Questions? Yeah.
For the historic home, will there be any restriction placed on that?
I don't know because we're not purchasing the home. The owner still owns it.
And same thing with the acreage around the home. You would say if her family wants to build there, but she could also sell it to developers.
Yeah, she is keeping it, but yeah. So for now, yes, but we'll see. But we have saved at least 45 acres, so. Great.
Anything else on this one? Thank you. We have 11 others. Are there any one of these in particular that people would like more information on tonight? Bill?
A quick question, it mentions pickleball, and what is that?
Oh, that's a big thing these days, exactly.
Very popular.
30 words or less.
So pickleball is a new sport. I guess a group of residents came before the Recreation Commission, and we're seeking to convert an existing tennis court or basketball court in town for pickleball. It's like ping pong and tennis combined.
It's a running game for elders, but not much running. But anybody can play it.
Is the ball round or shaped?
Yes.
Okay, that's enough of an answer. Just didn't know.
Anything else? I have a question that maybe Andrea, have there been requests put out to CPC that were not approved, that were not granted?
None.
Does anybody know? Or I'm not sure
I
who's.
think there was one application that was to paint the Parkerville schoolhouse, but it wasn't legal because it was maintenance, and you can't use CPC funding for maintenance. So
Interesting.
they did approve the rest of the applications submitted.
Okay, thank you.
I forgot that.
What is the Willard Hall Journal?
I think, actually, it's a very old book that the library has. It's the oldest book in Westford.
It was Reverend Willard's book. He was the clergy. He was here until the Revolutionary War before he was kicked out. But he kept a journal, and you have to have a minister to head of town, so he was the first minister.
Thank you for sharing that.
I think I got it from the Eagle. I could be wrong. Remember? What's the difference
Yeah.
between preservation and maintenance then? Preserve a book. Historical,
Yeah, we're not painting the book, yes.
Okay, Article 14, moving
I
along.
think the notion, once you've preserved it, it's good forever. If you're just painting, it's, yeah.
Okay, the second motion under Article 13.
You want to do the Adams? Adams property?
Sure. Similar to the Saltbox Farm, there's a piece of property off Old Lowell Road that has been desired by the Conservation Commission for quite some time. We've actually been discussing this purchase with the owners for, I think, several years. Have recently come to an agreement to purchase the parcel. Peter, do you want to speak to it, Peter? It's a Conservation Commission priority, so you maybe can do more justice than I can to the.
So for the past 2 years, this is a 50-acre parcel It borders Lowell Road and kind of heads southwards, parallels kind of Providence Road. It's 50-plus acres. It consists of all forest. It contains the top of Little Tadmark Hill, which is up 300 feet in the air. It contains a pond. It contains a vernal pool. It's just a beautiful wild area. It goes all the way from Lowell Road and butts up against the back of Kersey Circle. And there's actually an old road that goes through there. It was an old town road, and you can follow that road all the way from Lowell Road all the way to Main Street, believe it or not. And we're still negotiating as part of the purchase to make sure that we have a trail access all along all the way out to Main Street. But we've been working on this with the Adams family for a couple of years, and we finally have come to a pretty much 99% agreement. We still have to survey the property. But they did present to us a subdivision plan that would contain 34 houses, and that's what the value was based off of. And the commission did a site visit. It was presented to the town planner just to confirm that all these houses could be built on this parcel. And so that's the option. If the town doesn't buy it, they're gonna develop it to a contractor. So, and like I say, it's just a beautiful parcel. It connects to the Cider Mill dam parcel, which is about 40 acres on the east side, and on the west side where the old Lawton's property is, we have an additional about, I think, 20-plus acres of conservation land there. So with this purchase, we'll have a united parcel of over 100 acres in that part of town.
Emily?
And the reason that this is 4 times as expensive as the Salt Box Farm, I think is because the Salt Box Farm has much more wetlands.
Yeah, the Saltbox Farm parcel, yes, which the commission endorses. The town's going to get the conservation restriction on that. And yes, it's a lot of wetlands, yeah.
In contrast, we did our survey that we only get about 16 homes there at most. If you develop the whole thing.
Right, but this is like 4 times.
It is, but we're buying the property, so we're not, it's not a CR. So this will be town-owned conservation land. So be open to the public, the trails will be all open to the public, so it'll be a beautiful spot to go for a walk, yeah, a hike. Yep.
Any questions, any more? Thank you, Peter.
Yep.
Now, Article 14?
So I already kind of touched on it earlier, but the school department and general government have worked together to submit a plan for town meeting to create the position of a combined facilities director. So that would, again, be a new position to look at our long-range facility assets in town.
And the Director of Parks, Recreation, and Cemeteries. Those of you who are at the October special town meeting might remember that we asked to decrease the band for this position from a 7 to a 6. Eric took on the responsibilities of the cemetery director and temporarily for recreation and parks as well. We went out and we hired a new person. He's the former assistant town manager for Framingham. He's very capable, and we need to give him additional responsibility, 1, to free up Eric, and 2, to keep him challenged. So we're requesting to increase this band back to a 7, where it was previously to October.
Parks and Rec experience as well.
Yes, he has. He started in Parks and Rec in Framingham.
Any other questions on that? Okay. Article 15,
So-
authorize revolving funds.
All right, so this is the annual revolving fund article. There's only one slight change from last year, and that's on the school bus transportation line item. It went from $694,000 to $700,000. This is the annual article that we use to set the expenditure limits for the town revolving accounts. So on Monday, we had our motions meeting, and town council suggested some language in here so that these amounts will carry over from year to year in perpetuity unless we bring it back and change those amounts through a town meeting vote. So the selectmen will be looking at that during their meeting on Tuesday night to see if they want to support that or not, that little amendment.
I'm sensitive to the time. Is there anything that jumps out at anybody on that? On the revolving fund article? If not, we'll move on to 16.
16 is just a budget. I mean, no big deal. So everybody got their FinCom book in the mail during the blizzard, I hope.
Right.
So
Right.
they were troopers. They got out there. Post office delivered. Just to keep it brief, I mean, we've been meeting since November, since Jody first presented her budget. I started the process back in July with Jody and Eric, and we've had several budget hearings. The Finance Committee and Board of Selectmen and School Committee have all agreed to a budget for this year. And yeah, I would recommend going through this at least to check it out rather than going line by line.
Can I ask just a general overall question?
Sure.
So we have the actual 2017, the budget for 2018, and then FinCom. Answer my
Okay.
Sorry.
And most importantly, it's operationally balanced once again.
It's operationally balanced for the 4th year in a row, so.
Okay.
In spite of, I think, the worst year for new growth we've had in my memory,
Ever.
it's still
Yeah.
operationally balanced. Very good work on the part of the FinCom, town manager, and town department heads.
Article 17, local transportation funds for roadway maintenance.
Chapter 90, this is our road money we get from the state. It's $887,000 for next year. This item's on the consent agenda.
Okay. Water enterprise, Article 18.
Again, we have this article every year. This is the model for how the OPEB funding is supposed to work. The Water Enterprise fully funded their OPEB liability back in FY15 by transferring $700,000 into it. So each year, they accrue additional liability throughout the year, so they're going to appropriate $30,000 into the stabilization fund, and then these are the actual projected costs for the Water Enterprise retirees, so we'll take those out of the stabilization fund. So we do this so it's transparent, so everybody can see how this works.
Article 19, establishing a real property exemption for disabled persons. And Scott, you're going to take that?
So 19 and 20 are different but linked. So at last year's town meeting, the members of town meeting directed the selectmen to come up with a plan to deal with the increasing taxes for our low-income, disabled, and elderly population, typically dealing with benefits that are increasing at nothing to paltry percentage points and taxes increasing more quickly. And so hence some real financial pressure. So what 19 does is address the disabled part of the community by using an existing 41C state law, which is meant for seniors. It's a means-tested approach to giving a tax credit, if you will. So in Westford, we allow a $2,000, up to $2,000 tax credit for eligible seniors. We would extend that to the disabled. Disabled being defined as, meaning the definition of the Social Security Administration. So you can't just say you're disabled. There's a means test to being truly disabled. We then be an asset test under 41C, and then you would have a exemption up to $2,000 for your taxes. We don't have a hard count of the number of folks who would qualify in Westford, but the best guess from the senior center staff is around 6 families. So at $2,000 cap per family and 6 possible families, it's not going to be a budget buster by any means. Anyway, there's people, members of, so we had, I should also back up one step. Being selectmen, of course, we defer all of our responsibilities to another group called Slider. I said that in jest, but Slider is Senior Low-Income Disability Tax Relief Committee. My acronyms too. They've been meeting like I think every 2 weeks since last summer. Every week. Very hard-working committee digging into all the options available to us. They presented to the selectmen in November a range of options that would help meet these goals. And what you see as Articles 19 and 20 are the result of that discussion and refinements with the selectmen over the past couple of months. So many thanks to the committee. I know the chair is here, Tom Spuler. Paul Fassbender is here. I'm not sure if anybody else is here from the committee, but great work, lots of work, and hopefully will pay off.
Anything more to add for 20?
No.
Okay.
Sorry, well, okay, sorry, on 20, yes, sorry. 19, no, 20, yes. So 20 is the article for the seniors. This is a little more complicated. I should make a mention that in both cases we're enacting a home rule petition, so we're actually going to ask the general court to approve legislation to let us do 19 and 20. They will not take effect immediately. It'll go to general court. They will hopefully approve the home rule petition. It'll come back to town meeting for a second vote. It then goes to a ballot vote. So these are cumbersome processes to get relief for our most needy members of the community. 20 is more complicated than 19 because there isn't really a nice, there's 41C already. We need to work in addition to that. And so we get into looking at asset values, what is income, because you could have income from various sources. So it's a much more complicated metric, but the end gets to the same place, which is meant to be a tax break to seniors. This one is meant to be capped at $350,000 in total, all beneficiaries combined. So on a budget of $123 million, not a huge sum of money to the town, but certainly I think it will benefit to those who need it the most. This also has a requirement of 10 years residency in Westford, so it's meant to benefit those who bought a house here years and years ago, raised families here, did not expect to have a town blossom as it has, have the home values appreciate as they have, and get into a spot where taxes are as high as they are. So want to try to defer some of that expense.
Is that a $2,000?
That's could be that would be to cap their taxes at 10% of their income. So it's a variable number. It could be more than 2,000, or it could be less.
Who would make the determination of eligibility?
The Board of Assessors will be in charge of overseeing it. So the Board of Assessors have a seat on Slider, and if you've seen some of the select board meetings and special meetings, there are some thorny details of implementation, such as defining what is in the state, and those judgment calls are difficult. So we're working with between Slider and assessors to try to minimize the range of decision making that is instinct and maximize that which is codified as fact. Is that a fair statement, Paul? Okay.
It certainly is.
There's also a lot of detail in the article, so at your leisure, you can read and be prepared for town meeting and for any questions. Anything else?
Did you want to, I think Paul may
Oh,
want
It's
to.
appropriate to make a quick comment.
Sure.
Those of you who remember the article from last year, a bunch of us, myself included, got up on the floor of town meeting and said, this is way too complicated, we can do better. This one does look almost as complicated, and there are some good reasons for it. I hope as we go forward with the process, you'll come to some of our public meetings and learn more about this. This is a complicated issue. You won't be able to learn enough on the floor of town meeting, probably, to answer all your questions. So we're trying to do a lot of outreach as we go through our development process.
And the selectmen are taking positions on this, I think, on the 20th. So assuming no more nor'easters, you also can see more deliberation next Tuesday night.
Okay. 21?
So 21 is a payment in lieu of tax agreement for Western Solar Holdings at 10 Commerce Way. So essentially, the principal assessor for the town approached the Board of Selectmen and recommended that we pursue this pilot, is what they call it, for this solar plant. So essentially, there have been a couple of appellate tax board cases where the solar farms, they don't have to pay property taxes when they're giving electricity to non-exempt entities. So there have been 3 rulings so far, and every time the tax board has ruled in favor of the solar farm. So what we're trying to do is work with the owner of that solar farm and come up with an agreement for a certain number of years where they pay a certain amount of taxes each year rather than the full rate. because we're at risk of losing the entire property tax assessment on this parcel, which is about $80,000 per year. So they're still working out the numbers at this point.
Questions?
And I will just add, we did receive email from this member, or the requester for this article, and they were asking to postpone this into a future town meeting, so it likely will be passed over at town meeting floor. But I don't know how that's typically handled in the past.
Well, it'll come to the Board of Selectmen next Tuesday. We'll, hear the comments, and if it is, the biggest thing is certainty. If we do not know the cost, we would probably recommend deferring it, but I'm one member of the board, not 5, so it will be up on our agenda for Tuesday night, and if it's a lot of uncertainty, we probably would recommend deferral, but the key there is probably, so.
Okay. Easements, Article 22. Scott?
This is sort of a standing item that allows the Board of Selectmen to take easements as we need to for projects. We don't do land takings. We do usually it's temporary easements. If you're doing some road work, need to park equipment for some period of time, we get temporary easements to do that. But we've been doing this, I think, every year as a matter of pro forma for decades, and it's on the consent agenda just as a typical placeholder.
And then 23 for easements again.
So 23 is a more specific project. This is the proposed stoplight at the intersection of Dunstable Road and Route 40. So if you remember the BP station, at that point there's a separate article under the capital to fund construction of a stoplight at the location, and this is the necessary adjunct to that to let the town take the land or pay for the land via an easement to do that kind of that work.
Are there any residential ones there?
There is mostly, in fact, the BP is the only commercial property. There are several effective residential properties, yes.
I was going to ask you how many approximately residential are impacted.
I want to say it's 3 that are directly impacted with permanent easements. Along with 4, there may be a few more that are going to be temporary.
But there's several within that project realm.
Right.
Including 2 historic ones right near that intersection.
Can I add, Diane? So with the acquiring of the easements, so these are in capital. The capital article earlier is for non-participating costs. So under the Federal Relocation Act, which you'll hear Paul Starrett talk about all the time, we are required to have appraisals conducted for each of the easements we plan to take as related to this project and compensate those property owners accordingly.
In fact, if you saw the subcommittee meeting, I think it was 2 meetings ago, we actually approved the money for the appraisals to take place.
Article 24. We have a hot one here.
This is a hot one. All we're trying to do is change the bylaw so we can start special town meetings at 7 o'clock rather than 7:30.
No questions, I'm assuming.
So we ought to be out as late, right? Right. It's not more work, it's just an earlier start time.
Okay, Article 25, retail use of single-use plastic checkout bags. And Dick Coleman is going to speak. You didn't have a presentation, or?
I do.
You do, okay.
Okay, it's short.
Okay, well, I meant anything to
I
display.
do not have one ready. I do expect to have one for the town meeting. You'll see up there pictures. So you can kind of imagine them as I'm speaking, all right? Okay.
Okay.
Most likely at this time of year or at any time of the year, plastic bags are not uppermost on your minds or in your hearts. I understand that. But for just a few minutes, I would ask you to give it some thought. Recently, the country of Kenya has banned almost everything about plastic bags, importing them, selling them, making them, with penalties up to 4 years in jail or fines up to $38,000. Women have been caught smuggling them in their bras, and the black market is booming. So why would they do this, along with almost 40 other nations? I do not have the full answer, except that they know that they were awash in plastic bags. And for that matter, the world is awash in plastic bags. And so are our oceans. 8 million tons, that's tons of plastic, pollute our oceans. And plastics do not so much degrade as break up into microplastics, estimated at 5 trillion pieces. What matters is that those microplastics are digested by shellfish, fish both small and large, as well as birds that enter the food chain, that very food chain that we eat from. Well, I could say more about this, but here in Westford, plastic bags are not a major litter issue. And yet 62 towns in our state and cities have already enacted bylaws much like the one which you will vote on today. And by the way, so has New York City, Paris, Seattle, and the city of Boston by a vote of 12-0. This verb, if I might call it, may soon become a state law. And if it does, the business community would welcome it because they can deal with a standard law much better than they can with a patchwork of local laws. So why not wait for a statewide bylaw? Because it may happen and it may not happen. And if it does happen, it does not solve the basic issue of how it's going to be enforced from town to town. And also because plastic bags in Westford are a problem because they cannot be recycled. So where do they end up? For the most part, they end up in your trash where they are transported away and burned. A fine fitting to a product meant to be thrown out. A fitting end to something that began as plant life, then over time became carbon, then extracted from the ground as oil, then manufactured and transported using more oil, and finally returning to nature as toxic smoke. The Sierra Club estimates that each Westford person uses 300 plastic shopping bags a year. Sounds about right to me, which comes over to 7 million bags in Westford. I want to applaud all the stores in town that have already moved from the single-use plastic bag, from hardware stores to also restaurants and supermarkets. I like to think of this bylaw as a teaching moment. If the next time you as a consumer and as you leave a store, you are not given a thin film, single-use plastic bag, you will stop and think and ask, why? Those plastic bags are a convenience, not a right. And I know, and you know, that we can get by refusing almost all kinds of plastic bags if we really wish to do so. We've got 2 hands to carry things out. And we know we can remember to bring into the store one of those reusable plastic bags we already have. And while paper bags are not the best answer, they are a better one when they are made of 40% post-consumer waste. The BYOB group, and that of course would be bag, was formed to encourage the use of recyclable bags. And we do not see our task to be ended whether this bylaw is passed or not. Even in stores where paper bags have now displaced plastic bags, we can do better by using a bag not made from oil and meant to last for many years. The purpose of this bylaw, as it is plainly stated in section 1.1, purpose and intent, is not so much to deprive you of something you may love and think you cannot do without, but to encourage the use of recyclable and biodegradable bags in the town of Westford. And to be proud that we have yet another way to demonstrate that we care about the health and environment of where we live and our planet.
Good.
That would be my opening comments, and then we'll get into the bylaw, which at that point would be put up on the screen.
Thank you. Questions?
So I have a suggestion. You may want to add another example to your list.
Oh, yeah.
I started using these for groceries, reusable canvas bags of all sizes, and I found them so convenient. I carry my papers to committee meetings in them now. You know, so there are a lot of other things than paper or plastic.
Well, yes, I am going to have also someone get up and get at the thing we keep getting asked. I'm going to miss those plastic bags, and then that person will take out from their other bag all the other bags which you don't think you have. The bags that come when you buy celery and lettuce and bread, and I've got a whole stack already, and it just keeps on growing. Okay.
John Chung?
No, nothing is recyclable that's plastic, period, but in terms of a bag.
Market Basket collects them.
But I thought they were used for
Yes,
trash.
so that's the question I had
I
too.
thought they were
is
used for trash.
Market Basket has that.
They are for people who are going to take them to the one or two places that can be done, okay? But how many people do that?
So we have a question from John
Yeah, I
Chung?
know, yeah.
This is part of this discussion. My question is, what about the biodegradable bags?
They,
There's no such thing? They're okay?
Biodegradable bags.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you were asking.
So the plastic bags we're talking about, you ban those, and what's the difference? What's the difference between the plastic bags and biodegradable bags?
Well, if you look up there, and let me get my copy. This bylaw isn't going to ban plastic bags. It's going to restrict a very specific kind of bag. The thin plastic single-use bag you get to carry things out when you leave a store. It also includes all the other bags that is not included in this bylaw, and that you will find B, yes, B. Other than film, yes, other than thin film plastic bags used to contain dry cleaning newspapers, produce, meat, salt, food, wet items, perishable, and other similar merchandise, typically without handles. Those are not being banned. So you'll get all of those bags still.
So those little bags that Market Basket puts fruit in, those are not gonna be
No.
banned? But they're not recyclable?
No, they're not. In fact, that's part of the issue, because if you put them into your recycle bin, they then go to some place where all of the other recyclable stuff goes, and those bags clog things up, so so they have to shut it down and stop everything and pull them out by hand. So the Recycling Commission endorsed this, because they see it as a way of reducing those bags getting into the wrong place.
So every time you restrict something, you may want to offer some alternative. That's what we're doing. Yeah, but those things, for me, I constantly forget about bringing bags. I mean, it provides convenience for me to go to the store and get it back, and also we use that for.
So hold that thought, and everybody hold their question. We're running really tight. We still have several. Dick is around afterwards, so this is the whole
Yes.
purpose. Approach him
Around
afterwards with your questions.
and then we have these
Okay.
these flyers from the BYOB group, and they answer the 7 most important questions that people ask. I'll leave it back there.
And we also have to be out of here by 9, tight. So we're going to move on to the next one and approach Dick right afterwards with your questions. And obviously at town meeting, you'll have the opportunity to ask your questions then, right? Okay, so that was a long one. So Article 26.
Okay, Article 26 is in regards to an annual list of delinquent parties. It's pretty straightforward. This is a bylaw we have in town, and our town council has recommended we amend that. This is due to changes with the Municipal Modernization Act. So currently, as you know, the town issues various licenses and permits, and the way that the bylaw is currently written, if any entity, corporation, or person is delinquent in taxes in any form for a period of 12 months, we could withhold permits or licenses to that individual. Due to the changes in Municipal Modernization Act, we can immediately withhold permits and licenses for failure to pay taxes. We don't have to wait a year. So that's it.
Okay. 27.
So
Scott.
the Fletchers have been a firefighting family in this town for generations. Harold Fletcher Jr. retired just about 2 months ago. His father was captain of Company 1, which is Center Station, when I came to town in 1986, I think it was. George Fletcher just passed away about a year ago, was a former fire chief. So the Fletcher family has been very involved in town firefighting for many years, and the fire department wants to honor that tradition with a name on the new fire station as the Fletcher Station #1.
And then 28.
And 28, similarly, Kevin Regan was principal at the day school for a number of years. All my 3 kids had him as a principal. And as he retired as principal and took over fundraising for the playground at the day school, which is also on our warrant for town meeting under the CPC monies. So the desire to take that gymnasium at the day school and name it after him, and I think it's a very good idea.
Any immediate questions?
Recognize the gymnasiums, because I know we did at Abbott, I forget what we now, but is there a plaque that goes up or something that actually shows that?
That's a school committee question. I don't know. Do you know, Lisa?
I believe when they just redid maps, there was, when they renamed maps, those times. Yes, I think there is, but I will get back to you.
So out of curiosity, that's not a big expense, but I'm just wondering, is that then a school committee expense?
I don't know. Part of me feels like that might have been PTO or building funds, but I will find out and
So
then
it's
get
up
back
to
to
the
you.
school, it's not, it's like the town's just saying.
Don't quote me on that, I'm not entirely sure.
But
I will look into it.
You can make a recommendation at town meeting.
It's not mine. And that's why we just started something now.
Okay. I think that's, unless there are any more questions, I think there's a wrap. The only thing left for all of you, all the registered voters in town, is to attend town meeting. So Saturday, March 24th, at the Abbott Gym, starting at 10 o'clock. There'll be a boxed lunch served, for those of you who are familiar with that. And if the meeting does not finish in time, it'll obviously have to reconvene on Monday. And then the other comment is for all of you to read your finance recommendation. Give a plug for this booklet. It does have the list of articles in it, as well as a lot of detail. You may want to bring that with you to town meeting as backup information, which I think is a great idea. It was mailed to all Westford households.
Are there extra ones at town hall?
Yes, I have a couple boxes in my office, so nobody knows it's a town meeting.
Right.
People have been stealing them left and right.
Right.
Just walking in and be like, oh, I'll take one of these.
Reusable water bottles.
Really. And would like to thank again Scott Hazelton, Eric Heisman, and Dan O'Donnell, and everybody else who contributed to tonight's event. Thank you for everybody's time, and be sure to attend town meeting on the 24th. It's an open, as you know, our formal government is open town meeting. So it's an opportunity for your voices to be heard, and we may not have this forever. So take advantage and please be sure to go. It's a wrap. Thank you, everybody. Bye. And people around.